So we will be fine. Let's up that a little bit and up that studio light a little. Okay, there we go. Okay, so I think I'll be good from here. Like I said, it took me just a little bit of time to figure this out. So I'm good. Hey, Carmen, how are you? Um, so I'm working with the fuzziness of it because, yeah, I tried to use a different camera. I'm using my webcam. So we are working on the layer cake lemonade quilt. These are the other ones that are involved, and we'll talk a little bit about that before we get started on the quilt itself. This is an easy quilt, easy. So you just need a layer cake. Um, a layer cake, it's nothing more than 10-inch squares that are cut from a specific manufacturer, if you will, of fabric of their collection. So when we have quilt fabric collections, they come in different colors and possibly in different prints. Sometimes they may be all the same print with different colors. Sometimes they just may be a whole bunch of prints. It could be any myriad of things. So I, of course, am using the Christmas collection. And for this absolutely adorable layer cake that I have, I am using these. So these again are 10-inch square blocks. The directions that you print out, they will give it to you for a 5 by 5 inch square, which is called a charm pack, or they'll give it to you for a 2.5 by 2.5 inch square, which is called a mini charm pack. You could use any one of those that you choose to use. The whole thing is to make sure that you are using squares and then half of squares, because you're going to cut these in half in order to make the different brick layers. You could use your stash. So if you're like me and you have a ton of Ankara fabric in your stash, you could absolutely cut all that up and make them into 10-inch squares. Unless you want to make them smaller, you could make them bigger. But the key is to have squares. So this particular pattern calls for 20 squares that are going to be 10 inches. And then I cut one separately. We're going to cut the layer cake in half at some point, and half of a layer cake is 5 inches by 10 inches. And then you're going to need about 30 that are this size. So if you are cutting up your fabric, then my suggestion would be to cut your 10-inch, your stash into 10-inch squares, and then cut your stash into 5 by 10-inch squares for this, because all you're doing is cutting it in half. But depending on the scraps you have, you may have, let's say, 6 by 12s, and it's just easier to cut these down than it is to scavenge throughout all of your scraps to try to find 10s just to cut them in half anyway. So that's what you're going to need. And again, the directions will tell you everything that you need. They tell you to use the layer cakes. They tell you, when you're going to cut them. But this is just that workaround for it. So we need the layer cake. A layer cake typically has 40 to about 42 different cuts all in the package. So they tell you that you need about 40 of these in order to do what you need to do. 20 for the one, 20 for the other. And what I mean by that is that we're going to separate these into piles. This is their suggestion. So that you have all your darks together and you have all of your lights together. So you can separate it any way that you want. It could be scrappy. You could have if you're using scraps, you might have all your blues and greens together. You may have all your reds and oranges together. You could mix this up whatever you want, but they just want to make sure that there's some contrast, and hopefully you don't have a lot of overlap of the same color when you're putting everything into those rows. So that's the only difference for that. So I have already taken my fabric and I have placed them into their perspective piles, or respective piles. Okay, respective. It's not perspective, right? So I put them already in their piles. And so I chose to use the reds and the greens for my dark fabrics. And I'm working with a color palette that was really only red, green, and white and gold, and more so gold than red and than the white. So most of my colors in my lights are going to be those whites and golds. And then I did use some of the lighter greens in there. So I separated everything out into the piles because that was just pre-work that I could do offline rather than, hey, Peppermint Mocha, how are you? So everything could just be separated and I wouldn't have to do a lot of work. I also did some other things that I will share with you as well, because we know that time is of the essence for folks. And when we are quilting, sometimes it could take longer. This should not take long at all, but I just wanted to show the different parts to you. We're going to sew all of our fabrics into rows. So there are so many of the layer cakes that are going to be in a row. And we're just going to use a quarter inch seam allowance. But make sure that when you're doing this, that your directional fabric is all going in the same direction if you are using directional print. So I have my deers and trees, and I want to make sure that when I get to my Christmas trees, they're going in the same direction. Okay, so that's key for that. The way that they set this pattern up is that after you get all your rows together, your lights and your darks, you're going to take your lights, and I didn't bother to sew those, so I'm just going to talk about it. I'm not going to cut the fabric. You're going to cut the light in half lengthwise, so that you will end up with two pieces that look like this. So these are going in between your big layers. You're going to have these in between the small layers. I did a couple more little tweaks to the pattern just because I didn't want to waste fabric, and I am big on not wasting fabric, but I did want to show you that at least you're sewing everything together and then you are cutting these in half. I'm using my Husqvarna Viking machine. This is Emerald 116. It is my rider. It does everything that I needed to do. I absolutely love my machine. Again, this fabric is by Island Boutiques. It is complete batik fabric. Batik fabric is a little bit different than quilter's cotton. So batik fabric in some cases will look the same on both the right side and the wrong side. In this particular case, I needed to make sure that I had some fabrics that weren't faint on one side more than the other. That's how I could tell the right from the wrong. With quilter's cotton, the print is on one side because that's how they print on the fabric. And then the other side is just kind of blank. So you know the right side from what we call the wrong side because of where the print is. With this, it's a little harder to tell, but sometimes, and I don't know, I think I should have one that is, when I come to it, I'll show it to you where you can really see the difference. All of these kind of look the same, but there's a little fainter, like if you have like gold print or something like on it, they're not going to gold print both sides. Hello, Creatively Chic. How are you doing today, darling? Okay, so we have one row done. And again, this was just pre-done to talk about what this looks like when we excuse me, when we are cutting this in half, even though the darker is not what we cut in half. We leave this as is. So I'm just going to set this over to the side. And since it just makes sense to do one of the lighter ones, let's just get one of the lighter ones done. And while I'm sewing, if I can find my foot, my sewing foot. Okay, we'll do the other side. Okay. So while we're sewing these together, how is everyone doing today? We are slowly but surely counting down to Christmas. And as usual, anybody who knows me, I wait until the last minute to do everything. So of course, I am getting all of my Christmas things together for the holiday season. And it's for me, so it doesn't matter. But yeah, we waited till the last minute. So I am just going to take my fabrics that I have for my lights. I'm placing them right sides together. And I'm sewing at 1/4 of an inch. I am making sure that as I am laying right sides together that I'm paying attention to what is the more prominent side opposed to the more faint side so that I don't end up with the wrong side up top. It'll look a little fainter, and I don't want that to happen. I'm also paying attention to my directional prints because I do have a couple in this collection. And I don't want my directional prints to go in the wrong direction. I will do these row by row. Chain piecing is the best. Like, you just finish things quickly. I do want to do these row by row so that I don't mix them up. So I will do some chain and then some, and then just some to finish the rows. So now I did the 2 together, and now I'm sewing the 2 together to make 4 in the row. And I have 5 of them because I'm cheating a little bit. And we'll talk about that at the end. Again, this is a free pattern. Hey, Carol, this is a free pattern, and the pattern is by Fat Quarter Shop. And I absolutely love a free pattern. I do believe in paying for patterns. I believe that somebody's work is worthy of its pay, but if I can get a free one, yes. I think it opens the door, especially for people as they're learning how to quilt. Because any sewing, any crafting can be expensive. And the hard part is that, the more expensive it is, the less it is for some people to be able to do what they need to do. Okay. So everything is stitched together. Tanya, how are you? Hey, Shamir. So everything is stitched together. Again, I'm using all of the lighter fabrics. That was the suggestion in the pattern. I have not made this before, so I don't, other than seeing the picture, I don't know what the difference is between using lighter and darker. What I would suggest is that you could, if you wanted to, you could draw this out, and then you could figure out what it would look like with certain colors. If you wanted to reduce the amount of colors you were using, you absolutely could do that. That's a personal preference. I have graph paper that I use for some of my patterns if they don't come with a coloring sheet. That's the big thing now for a lot of the quilt patterns, especially if you pay for it. Nobody's giving you anything for free and going all out of their way for something. Most of the Fat Quarter Shop patterns are only a couple pages. So yeah. But if you can make a coloring sheet and then change the colors of the pattern, you can see what it would look like. Let's say if I did this in all purple, shades of purple. So what would that look like? And then I could determine what my layout is based off of my color choices. So again, this is personal preference. I'm choosing to go with the Christmas colors because I said to myself at the last minute, self, you don't have a lot of Christmas quilts. Now, don't get me wrong. I have a lot of quilted projects that are Christmas themed. And a lot of them are wall hangings. I do have one quilt that is absolutely Christmas themed. I usually hang it up every year. I don't know if I'll hang it up or not this year, but I do have that. Let me slide this out of the way. And again, I usually do everything in batch, but I'm doing this separately just because I want to make sure that I go over all of the things with everyone. Okay. My 1/4 inch seam. Try to get rid of those threads when I can. My 1/4 inch seam is set. I press the seams open. Personal preference. You can press them to one side. Now, if I'm paying attention, I should be able to do this and do this well. Thank you, darling. Thank you, Carmen. I appreciate you. And so we are going to line up our ruler. Remember, I said that a layer cake is 5 inches. No, excuse me. A layer cake is 10 inches square. So if it's 10 inches square, it should be, and I'm just going to line this up on my cutting mat just to make sure. I've measured my layer cakes before just to make sure, but if they are exactly 5 inches square, I should be able to line my ruler up at the 5 right along the edge, and then line this up right to the 5 inches. And I'm going to double check because in quilting we measure twice, we cut once. You only get one time to cut. So we're going to check and make sure that everything is 5 inches. I'm looking out here. It looks like it's 5 inches. I'm using my True Cut system. This has like a little lip to it, and this has a little groove, so that just fits right in there. And I'm going to cut that at 5 inches. And then I'll move this down and do the next cut. Move that out the way so I don't accidentally cut that edge, because then I'll be mad even though I'll still make it work. So we just line everything up. If it's a little off, I'm going to adjust it. So that it's right at that 5 inch mark, because sometimes when you're sewing, you can get a little curvy. And then I will use my rotary cutter, move my machine out the way. Okay. For some reason, it didn't get the edge. So I will say this, when you are cutting like this, sometimes your seams can weaken. And if you can see that, it's starting to want to pull apart. So the one thing about subcutting when you're cutting across those seams is that they weaken. So you may have to just run over it by the machine again. Okay. So we have this strip now. So these are our second strips. Where did you move your first strip? And you moved it out the way. See, this is what I mean. Like, I will absolutely throw myself off. Like, you didn't go anywhere. Okay. So this is the first strip because it's right under everything else. And then this is the big one. And then this is half of the big one. This is the small one. And what's going to happen is I'm going to show you one extra step, but it's going to stagger like that. So none of your seams are going to match up. And this is also, to me, what makes it an easy quilt. When the seams don't match up, then I don't have to worry about nesting seams. I can just sew. That's perfect. So the second suggestion that they make in the pattern is to cut off what they say should be 4 3/4. It changes per pattern. If I'm going to adjust mine just a little bit because I want to add some on the end, and I'd rather trim up those blocks than to not have enough. Because what I found was that I had a block that was going to get wasted, and I was trying to avoid waste. So we're just going to save that off to the side and pray that I'll be able to find it later. And then I'm going to add a block onto this side. So what'll happen is it'll give me 2 short blocks, and that's what's going to create the staggering. So we're going to hang this on the chair so we can remember where it is. And I'm going to cut this one off as well. Now, of course, common sense would have said cut the 5-inch off first, because then you wouldn't have to have 2 cuts. You would only have 1. But then I still would have had to have cut the 5-inch on that. Okay. So put this over on this side, and we'll hang this. So we need 6 of the skinny strips. We need 4 of the fat ones. So let's go ahead and get the skinny ones out the way since they're here. You're not going to use one of them, and that's why, like I said, I adjusted this a little bit because I don't want a skinny strip that I'm not going to use. So let's get the rest of these together. And again, remember, we're making sure that if we have directional fabric, the directional fabric is going in the direction that we want it to go in. And then we're also checking, because this is batik, to make sure that the brighter side is the right side. Oops. And again, this is an easy pattern. That you can get from Fat Quarter Shop. And even though it is the Christmas, Hanukkah season for some of us, even though this is the holiday season for us, all we're doing is changing the colors to match the holiday, but these could be any holiday theme that you want them to be. So come Valentine's Day, you could absolutely use the reds, the whites, the pinks, the greens. If this were St. Patrick's Day, you could absolutely use the greens to make a quilt. Greens, light greens, dark greens. That's totally up to you. Okay. Let's see. I remember how I put those together. I want green on the end. Okay. I don't know why. No, I don't want green on the end. So we'll put these 2 together, and then I'll sew those. So again, I could, if I didn't care what was next to each other, especially if I were using a lot of scraps, I could absolutely chain piece these, but I do want to keep these in a certain order, which is the only reason why I'm kind of playing in my mind with how this goes. Again, there are 3 rows of lights that we're going to subcut in half, and there are 4 rows of the darks that we're not going to do anything with. So we have a total of 7 rows that need to be done. I've already finished 2. This is number 3. And this is the last light that we have to do. And again, welcome in, everyone. How are you doing on this Sunday afternoon? I know I woke up to having to go outside this morning to shovel. And before I leave here this evening to attend the Christmas event, I need to throw some ice down. But they said about 2 to 3 inches. It's a little bit more than that out there. But that's fine. It snowed, unfortunately, for some people on a Sunday instead of a Monday. So, for those of you who may be my students or parents, yes, we will have school tomorrow. Do not play with me. Because believe it or not, these people will call a school first thing in the morning and they will ask, do we have school? I'm like, there is not enough snow on the ground to ask that question. Yet they will ask the question. And then, and it all depends. Like, and I get it in some cases. I'm not calling it a dumb question. They just ask the question. There has to be ice out there for anyone to, to think that school will be canceled. So if it is extremely icy and it's treacherous, then yes, did I do that on the wrong side? Okay. They will cancel school, or they will do a delay just to make sure that the sun has an opportunity to come out. People can see when they're walking and they don't slip and hurt themselves in the street. So that's the purpose for the late arrival. Nobody wants to inconvenience anybody to try to go to work. And then you have to figure out your situation with your students. But, if it's treacherous. So we don't delay because of light snow. Like I said, unless it is treacherous in the morning. So if it, let's say, what would we say? If the sun is out and the snow melts, then we would have a lot of water underneath of the snow. And then if the temperatures drop, let's say to 18 degrees, that means that the water would freeze over to ice. And so then in the morning, when you get up, they call that black ice one year. Carmen may have been a young thing when this happened here in Philly, but we had black ice for like a week. And every morning we would get up and they would delay school, or, everybody would be late because you would go outside and you would basically be slipping and sliding down the street. And I was working at a nursing home, and unfortunately I was driving my grandmother's car at the time, and the car, like, I was coming down a hill and the car slid, and it slid right into a fire hydrant. Now, the good thing is that it was a big tank of a car. It didn't get any damage, but it was just scary because we're sliding down the hill. There's no way to hit the brakes. And you couldn't see the ice. And that's why, they call it black ice. And so it was like, yeah, who wants to drive in this? So so schools were delaying because of that. And again, it's inconvenient to the parent, but the goal is to make sure that, everyone is safe. And the students have to get on buses, and the buses have to get down hills. And traditionally, if you're from Philly and you know anything about the Manayunk section of Philadelphia, you know that that's nothing but hills. So traditionally, their buses won't even run. If the first one slides and they get out the back call to the rest of the group, yeah, they're not driving in Manayunk down those hills. So they're not doing it until like I said, it's light and you can kind of see the ice patches and know that everything is good. So, and they have to figure this out in Philly before, because Philly is a big place and we have one of the largest school districts in the country. So since we have one of the largest school districts in the country, our kids could be traveling all the way from one end of Philly all the way to another end of Philly. Okay, and I'm just now working on my dark blocks while I'm talking. So I have 2 more sets of dark blocks to go, and then that part will be done, and we'll be able to talk about the next part. So I'm just sewing everything together again in rows. So when I went to school, I lived in what was called the West Philly area, Southwest area of Philadelphia, and I had to go to school all the way in the North area of Philadelphia. So if I got on what we have as public transportation, which is called SEPTA, it would take me almost an hour, depending on how I went. It would take me almost an hour, hour and a half to get to school. So if you drove, maybe I could make it in about a half an hour, 45 minutes. But if I was on SEPTA and my mother wasn't driving me anywhere, she had to be to work herself. She was a teacher. It would take her about 45 minutes. So if it snowed, it took longer because the more people would catch public transportation. They didn't want to shovel their cars out. They didn't want to slide down the street. For any number of reasons, people would take SEPTA. So that meant that SEPTA was slower, public transportation was slower, and it would take us longer to get wherever we had to go. And there are some buses that, because of the routes that children who do get on yellow buses, they would have to, their bus drivers get to work at about maybe 5, 6 o'clock in the morning to do the first pickup. And so you had to go, maybe you had to brush the bus off. Maybe you had to go and warm the bus up, make sure the bus was working, the heat was working. So they had like a list of things that they had to do when they came in the morning. And as a result of that, that would delay the bus. And so that meant that it was possible, if a child had to meet up on a specific corner, wasn't door-to-door service, you would be outside cold. And that's in addition to the small streets in Philly that the buses couldn't get down. So because people were throwing the snow into the street, or like they were parking next to the snow, and so it narrowed the street, so it just made it very difficult for buses to get up and down. And so it was just easier to postpone the school day and or cancel the school day depending on the snow. So it's just a lot of factors. And back in the day, I think we were more neighborhoodish than we are now in terms of where children can go to school. So like Philly gets clowned a lot about their snow. Hey, Cynthia. So we get clowned a lot because back in the day we had a superintendent and her name was Connie Clayton. And they were like, when Connie Clayton was superintendent, we didn't cancel school. And we sure enough didn't. We went to school in blizzards. Connie Clayton's, God rest her soul, she believed that children needed to eat. There were plenty of children. We have maybe about an 87% poverty rate here in the city that go to public schools. And so she believed that students, like sometimes, the only 2 meals that our students would receive were breakfast and lunch, and they got those from school. So what she didn't want was for our children to go hungry because they didn't come to school that day to get a meal. So we would go into school, if there are any Philly people here, and we stayed in school until at least 12 o'clock. We had an early dismissal. And then we could go home. Now, mind you, we were probably going home in the tundra, but at least if you needed to eat, you could eat. Now, if your mama said, hey, we got food in the house and you didn't want to, you could stay home. So there were days where my mother would say to me, you don't have to go to school. And especially because, mind you, she only worked down the street. She worked at West Philly High. I went all the way out to North Philly. So her commute was maybe 10 minutes to get to work. And like I said, it took me a while. Like I was leaving at like 5, 6 o'clock at the latest to make sure that I was at school on time, especially if it was bad weather. And so she would tell me like at 5 o'clock in the morning, you don't have to go to school. And my twin brother would roll over and he would go back to bed. Now, mind you, he was closer than me. So he went to Overbrook, which is in like West Philly, if you will. It's the Overbrook section. People are snooty about their sections out there. So they don't want to call it Northwest or West. So they like to call it Overbrook. So he went to the Overbrook section for school. And he was like, yeah, okay. Maybe it took him maybe a half an hour to get to school. And he was like, I'm not going. So he rolled back over and went to sleep. Man, I got dressed. Because first of all, staying home meant there was always something to be cleaned. And I was like, yeah, that's not going to happen. And I'm social, as you can see. I love to talk. And so I wasn't going to stay home. And then who was I going to talk to? You're talking about somebody who grew up with pay phones, not cell phones. And there was only one family phone in the house. And if you had my mother for a mother, you weren't going to be on her family phone all day. Because her friends were calling and because you weren't going to run up her phone bill. So what was there? Like, there was no internet. There was no cable. So we don't even know. We didn't get a VCR. We just got a VCR when we were in, no, we just got VHS. I don't think we had no, we didn't have a VCR. I think we had VHS. We just got VHS when I was in high school. So that was before Blu-rays and VCRs. And so there wasn't like, there were games that you could play and things like that. We'd go outside and shovel all that snow, but I preferred to go to school. So I got up and went to school. And plus I had perfect attendance and we were not messing up my perfect attendance to stay home, which is the same way that I feel right about now when I go to work every day. So, it, like I said, there's just a lot of factors that play into it. No one's ever happy when school is or isn't canceled when there's snow. So you have teachers, let's say, that live in South Philly, and because of their streets, they don't want to shovel their car out and drive, and they don't want to walk in the snow to get to school. So they would prefer to take the day off. So they complain, oh, the streets are horrible. Oh, I got to shovel. And so they'll be on the internet later on social media crying about why they shouldn't have to go to school tomorrow. And they're also mad because there are schools that are getting out as of this Friday, and we have to go through next Tuesday. And I'm just like, at the end of the day, I'm pleased to have a job because there are plenty of people who are being laid off, who do not have jobs during this season. And I'm happy to have a job. So I don't have time to complain about the school system and what I don't like about it all day, and especially putting it on social media, because I have a job. And tomorrow, that position, that school, could go away. And so I'm just happy to be able to work. I'm happy right now that I can be happy in the job that I'm in. So I'm happy for those things. But like I said, not everybody feels that way, and I understand. I have pressed out, I have stitched together all of my blocks. And now all I'm doing is just pressing the seams open. Again, this is a personal preference, whether you want to press those seams open or whether you want to press them to one side. Again, it really doesn't matter in some cases because you're not lining up any of your seams in this pattern. So this is the last one that I have for the darks. And again, my dark fabric is going to remain like this. It's going to remain intact. It's the light fabric that I have to cut in half. So I have two of those that have to be cut in half. And then all of my rows will be done. And then it will just be time to put the whole thing together. So again, this is how easy this pattern is. It's not a difficult pattern. And like I said, there are just some things that you need to be aware of when you are putting this together. And one of them is the direction of your fabric. And again, if you're using batiks, to determine which side is the wrong side. And the good thing about batiks is even if you get it wrong, the good thing is that it's still forgiving because it doesn't look raw white. The difference would be if you had, like I said, some sort of metallic on top of it, because now the metallic is on the back. And so it's not noticeable, but you wouldn't be happy about that because you're losing that effect. Some batiks, however, will show a little bit more fade up than others. So that's why it's important to look. I wouldn't just, take my chances and say, oh, this isn't going to be that way, because it will, at the end of the day, the cotton doesn't start off as a as a green. It starts off as a white. It is dyed, so it goes throughout. And then you have this lovely green color. With the other cottons, they might dye it completely, which is why this is red on this side and it is red on this side. However, when they printed the pictures of the snowflakes on top, it only goes on one side. So again, is it the end of the world to see this red? No. But the whole purpose was to have the metallic stars. Okay, so we have all of the blues and greens. Oh, okay, greens and reds. Let's not call them blue. And now we're doing the lights, and we have two of these that we have to press. So again, this is not, as I'm going through it, a difficult quilt to make. Like the hardest part right now for me is just opening up these daggone seams because I decided to press the seams open. If I were thinking, I would have pressed them things to one side, and then I would be pressing this a lot faster. And so our building engineers are out today. So they go in, they get overtime. Building engineer is a sweet job to have. They'll go in today. They'll make sure that the heat starts up. They might not pump it all the way up, but they'll get it started for tomorrow. They will also make sure that whoever the company is that begins to shovel is shoveling. So the company may come in and just shovel a path to the door, or the building engineer will do it. Depending on how much land we have. They will shovel like from the street to the door, just so that people can walk up. And then when the cleaning staff comes tomorrow, they'll do a little better of a job than the building engineer did. Okay, one more to press, and then all of my rows will be pressed. Then I just need to cut these in half. And then, like I said, we'll be able to put these rows together. So again, for anyone who just came in, I am working on a Christmas edition quilt. This is, the pattern is Layer Cake Lemonade. And again, it's a pattern specifically for pre-cuts that are 10-inch squares, which are called layer cakes. But you can do it with anything. You can do it with yardage. You can use scraps. Your pieces, especially for the ones that I'm working with, have to be 10 inches square. For these light colors, they don't have to be 10 inches square. They could be 5 by 10. And then you could get the same result. This just means that I'm not doing as much sewing because I'm just going to cut these in half to get the 2 rows that I will get from each one of these that I do. But I can absolutely make the rows using 5 by 10s. One of the things that people will talk about when it comes to buying pre-cuts. Pre-cuts are not cheap. They are the way for the manufacturer to show us all the prints that they may have in a collection. So you get about 2 of each print for each of the pre-cuts. So I'll have 2 of these, 2 of these, 2 of these, unless if they have at least 20. And then some will be 3 just to round it out to about 42. If there's less than 20, I will get more cuts. So I'm taking my ruler. Again, I'm lining it up at the 5-inch mark. I'm going to make sure that it is 5 inches all the way across, because sometimes we will get a little wonky and it might curve on you a little. So you do want to make sure that everything's straight. And then I'm just cutting it in half. Remember, the pattern suggested, and keyword is suggested, that you do the lights together and the darks together. This is a brick type pattern, so you could do this any way you like. You are not married to having the lights and the darks. We're following their directions, but it's up to you. Whoops, didn't go all the way through that one. That's what happens when you don't pay attention. But I can just line my ruler up and get it. Okay, whoops. So these are done. These go up. So these 2 are together. And I just want to make sure that I don't have one right after the other, but that's personal preference. So I'm just going to clip these 2 together to remind me that that was all one set. Okay, and then we'll do this last one. So for the most part, I'm following the pattern. What I did do, going across, it will be about 48 inches wide. And I thought that was a little too narrow for me. So I added an extra block. So mine will be about 56 inches wide. I think that will allow for me to cover for extra body. So this is about a throw or lap size quilt. you would need more blocks, and they do give you the dimensions and the amounts of fabric that you would need for like a twin or queen. But that's up to you how big you want it. I'm good with throws. I like big fluffy blankets on my bed because I get cold, and so I usually don't throw the quilts on my bed for warmth and comfort. So I don't necessarily need a big one. But if I want to stage it for Christmas, I could make a bigger one to have it for that purpose. I don't know why it's jumping. It's not. I must not be pressing hard enough. Okay. And then these two are together. But let's leave one here. Oh, I forgot. We need to cut off our 5 inches. And I am going to add those 5 inches to the other side. One, two, three, four, 5. And we'll just cut that. Okay. And I can take these. Did I cut this off and then? Doesn't really matter. I'm adding these on because what the directions tell you to do is just cut off excess on each side, which means you're going to have these blocks left over. I didn't want these blocks left over. So I don't want these blocks on there. Let me cut the other one off first. These two are the ones that I clipped together. Yep. And instead of doing the green, I'm going to cut off the red. So again, this is an easy pattern, Lemonade. It is a free download. There are a bunch of free downloads on the Fat Quarter website for different size quilts. So if you are interested in making a quilt and you want just about any size jelly rolls, you could do pre-cuts, you could do yardage. It's totally up to you. You can go onto the website. Some of the patterns are paid patterns and some of them are free. Like I said, the directions may be a little sketchy if they are free because, hey, you're getting a free pattern. But the great thing is just about all of the patterns do come with some sort of video tutorial in some cases. A lot of times they may not do the whole quilt online. They'll show you how to do one of the blocks because some of the blocks are very repetitive throughout the quilt. So they'll show you how to do the blocks and then it's just a matter of you putting them together. So if there's any question, the question is more in the construction of the block than it is in putting the quilt together itself. Okay. So instead of cutting off both ends, I'm adding this on. But again, like I said, there's a possibility that it may be a little short on each side. And I'm okay with that, with the way that I did this, just because I didn't want to waste the fabric on either end. So we are going to finger press this, and then we will press that open. Okay, so this is block number 1. We're going to open this up, and I know what I did. There are 6 of these. I only need 5 of these. So there's an extra 1 somewhere in there. And I think I will use this as the extra 1. So what I was supposed to do was add an extra 1 into, excuse me, into here, because this is going to be 1 too short. So I'm just going to pop this out. I did forget that I told myself that I was going to do that. So I do need to add that. I added, so again, when I thought about this and I measured everything out, what I did, and I should have added that one more. What I did was I added an extra block. And because I added an extra block, there weren't enough in the layer cake. I had some left over from another layer cake that I worked on yesterday, but then I said to myself, oh, you got enough for this one. You just need to move some things around. And then when I put this together, I forgot to add them around. So that's okay. I only need to seam rip 2 of them. And then the rest of them, I'm going to try to remind myself that I need to add on that extra block. So I'm going to add the green one to this one. And then I'll add this one to the end of the green. And then I'll be able to put these together. So again, you can follow the directions as is. And if you follow the directions as is, you won't have to make this adjustment. I just need to make the adjustment because I decided to make this a little wider than what it called for. So traditionally, when I look at patterns, I'll make decisions about them when I'm looking at them. Is this going to be wide enough for what I want it to do? And if it's not going to be wide enough, then I can make it wider. And the way that I can make it wider is by adding a border or adding additional blocks. Or adding a bigger border, a second border, it depends. But I can make it wider that way. So if I take a quilt, like if I had more batik fabric that looked like this, which I don't, which is why I didn't do the border. If I had batik fabric that looked like this, I could add like a 5-inch border on either side, and that would have given me the extra width. That I needed for this particular quilt. And that's just me and what I needed because of what I felt like how wide I wanted it to go. Okay, let me put this up here. And we will take one of our rows. And here's where our clips come in. Let's move my extra over here so I remember it's over there. Hey, Sabs, how are you doing, darling? Okay, so we're going to take this. And again, I have directional fabric, so I need to be careful with how I'm laying this down. And remember, because it's going to be offset, I don't have to, and it's going to be a little off just because of how I did this, and I'll trim this up at the end, which is fine. I don't have to line up my seams, and I love the fact that I don't have to line those seams up. So I'm using the clips because I opened the seams up. So this will help me to keep everything nice and straight. If I use the clip over the seam, it will help me from stretching the seam. Remember, they're weaker because I cut some of them in half. So there's no tail or anything else like that to hold them together, and those seams will come apart. I will make a decision when I am doing that, whether it matters to me or not. Sometimes I will then get out that dastardly needle and I'll just do a quick whip stitch to close that up. But I'm just taking this now. And like I said, it's not too far off because you're only talking 1/4 inch. And I'm not worried about that. I could stretch it out to the 1/4 inch, but sometimes that'll cause waves. So I'm just going along and getting all of that together. And this is really all we're going to do for the rest of them. We're going to do a top and a bottom for the first and the last set of big blocks, and then all the rest of them, get them in between. That's it. So we'll take it now, because I know I'm on the end, I will do a back stitch. You could use your pins if you like. I prefer not to. Clips are a game changer in my sewing career. And just think, this is here's another suggestion, right? I might not use 10-inch squares. I could if I were making a quilted jacket or a quilted vest. Or quilted bag. So for all of my bag makers out there, my garment people, if I'm doing this, I absolutely could follow this pattern to make this new piece of fabric, if you will. And then I could quilt it if I wanted to, or not. And I could use this for my quilted skirt, my quilted jacket, my quilted bag. And so and if it's not quilted, let's call it patchwork. One of the suggestions for a jelly roll jacket that I was reading the directions for is that if you had a serger, this would be the perfect time if you are not going to quilt it. Like, you would serge it, and then that way everything would be in place. I'm just going to press this. Everything would be in place, and you wouldn't have to worry about those raw edges underneath. You're not going to see them, because for like the jacket, it's going to have a lining. But if you really wanted to, you could serge it, and it just adds an extra layer of security, especially because you're going to stress your clothes a little bit more than you do a quilt, because we do the quilting on top of a quilt. But with your clothing, because you're only using 1/4 of an inch seam, as you pull it over time, it may start to unravel. So by serging it, you're adding another layer of security there. But you could absolutely make a brick patch layer, bricked style quilt out of your scraps. So for this one, I don't feel like pressing the seams open, so I am pressing the seams to one side. And again, I could have done this throughout. It is totally up to you. I could press this to the dark side rather than the light side, but I'm not worried about seeing that fabric through it. But traditionally, we would press to the dark side. Usually what I do with my pressing is I just like to press it down so it lays flat. But my goal is just I take it up to my big iron on my ironing board, and I will really press those seams flat down when I get to the ironing board. So here are the 2 rows here. This is the top. I'm making sure that all those Christmas trees and everything else are in the same direction. And now I need another layer. We use this one. So let's pull one of these. Move the board out the way. I'm going to remind myself. I'll slide that out the way. Remind myself that I'm going to add an extra piece onto this end, and then I'm going to cap it off with this. So the extra piece is because I'm making this wider than what the pattern called for. So the pattern had blocks that were 5 across. I wanted it to be a little bit bigger, so I did 6 across. We don't need all of our skinny strips. And because of that, I am undoing one of those skinny strips. Make sure this is going in the right direction. No, it is not. So because I'm not using one of those skinny strips, I am just taking that one apart and using it as my next block in the skinny row. I do have some fabric that I did cut into a brick just in case I needed it. It was left over from the lights, so I do have that off to the side as well, just in case I needed it. Okay, so press that. That's open. I'm going to just finger press that, and then when I take it to my machine later, I will do this. So it's not to cause waviness. What I am going to do is I'm going to just put this on top of another block. So I'm going to bring in my second big block again. Make sure that my directions are going the way that I want them to go. And then lay wrong sides together and clip. And again, I am using my open seams for the clips. There are 4 rows of the big blocks, and there are 5 rows of the skinny ones. And again, remember, the seams are offset, so we don't have to line them up. And I love that part of this. And think about your brick walls that are outside, that you have outside, or maybe that are on a wall at home. You absolutely do not have to have them perfect. Now, if you're just anal like that and you believe that they need to be perfect, knock yourself out, but they don't have to be perfect. Now, you're cutting at 5 inches, so these should almost just about line up. But if they don't, it is nothing in the world. Okay, so we're starting the second set. And then I'll think 1, 2, 3, 4. I have 4 to go, so I have 2 more to do. And then I can connect those and then add that last row to the bottom. And then this quilt top will be done. And if you didn't see my post, you already know that I finished the quilt from yesterday. So before I laid my head down in that bed, I finished it. So my goal was to get 2 quilt tops done, and this is the second one. Keyword is quilt tops. Both of these quilt tops will take gold thread. I just need to decide what the backing is going to look like. And whatever I'm using for the binding. And I should be able to get these done as well this week. These are not gifts. So since they're not gifts, I don't have to worry about having them done before I go on winter break or to mail off to somebody's house. Now that doesn't mean that they won't sit somewhere and then be a gift next year. Okay, so I can press this one But I am going to leave that for now because I'm going to press them all at one time. Nope. I need to take this one. And we're going to, again, add a piece. I don't want to add this one, but what I can do is I can cut this off, and then all I need to do is add this. I do want to make sure that's not going to work because the Christmas trees are in the same direction. Oh, I have this and I have this. So I'm going to have a repeat, and I'm okay with that. I will live with a repeat. If I will not live with a repeat, I would do something different. And I could switch around the layers, but yeah, we're not doing it. So I wasn't paying attention to the fact that this was the one that I shouldn't have used this one just because I had the ornaments as the extra, but that's fine. The only person that's going to know and care that there's a repeat there is me. Nobody's going to know and nobody's going to care. Nobody's going to be looking that close. If I were making this for a commission, somebody asked me to make this and to use these, then I would absolutely take it out. And that's just because it's theirs. And I don't want the person to have my mistake because they're paying for it. But if you're getting this as a gift, be happy for the gift. Because you know that quilts don't come as gifts too often out of this house. Okay. Cool. So this one is done. I pressed that one. So again, we're going to lay this out. We're looking for any directional. There's no direction in this one. There is direction in this one. So I do need to make sure that it is going in the right direction. And I know as we're looking, we don't see it coming together yet, but we're already on the third row. Which if I say third means actually 6. So we only have so many more rows to go. Again, I'm clipping those seams, number 1, because it's going to keep me from stressing them. And they were subcut. And so because they were subcut, that thread is right up to the edge. And because it's right up to the edge, any bit of pulling that I do is going to separate the two pieces. And I want to avoid as much separation as I can. I may have some. It will not be the end of the world to have some of that happen, but you don't want it to happen so much that you're going to have to re-sew what you just put together. And like I said, if I have to, I will. But if I don't have to, I'll just get a little needle and thread. Even though I don't like to use them, but I will use a little needle and thread and I will line that up so that it goes perfectly. And again, I'm deconstructing it because I didn't want to waste the fabric and have a bunch of squares left over that I would have had no purpose for. Now, a quilter will always find a purpose for something. So I could make coasters. I could make a scrap bag project. I could have a purpose for it. Or in this this case, I was able to make it a little bit wider by keeping everything, going the way that I did. So I am running over this. I am using my fingers. I do keep them out of the way of the needle, but I am making sure that my pointer finger is securing the seam so that my feed dogs, when they're pulling the fabric, are not pulling it so much that it ends up pulling the seams apart. The great thing about this is that if I did the pressing in between the bricks, I can really wait till the end, take it up to my big iron board, and I can iron all the other seams now, the horizontal seams, at one time on the big ironing board. So I don't have to do it on my small project ironing board. Okay, so then this one is done. I have two in my lap, one off to the side that I pressed. And here is my last one. This is directional. It's in the right direction. I have one short end, and then I have this end. Ooh, we have red on that end, so I have another repeat. Or I can use one of these. So make sure this one does have somewhat of a lighter tone on one side. I'm going to line these up. We will use the Christmas trees. We'll take this back to the machine to add these on. So again, I'm adding on an extra brick to make this wider because I went wider overall, and I'm using the bricks that were left over rather than using more fabric. Make sure that that's the right direction. And then I am using what I cut off of one end to place on the other end so that I don't get any wasted fabric there. What color thread am I using? I am using gray. Traditionally, when we quilt, there are a couple different threads that we tend to have in our kits, in our stash, and they are white, gray, and beige. So I have to turn this upside down. I am using white. I'm using gray, sorry. And the good thing about the gray, I could have used red. I could have used green, or I could have used gold. Now, I very rarely use my gold unless I'm doing top stitching with that. But what happens is that you're not going, like once you quilt the quilt, you're not going to stress the seams depending on how you quilt it, so that they're going to pull apart like they would in a garment to have it be the same color. And with there being so many colors in the quilt, it's hard to say what the dominant color is. So if you use green, if there was stress, you would see the green in between the reds and the whites or the golds. If you use white, same way, you would see the white in between the reds and the greens. So the easiest thing to do is to use some neutral color. So I tend, like for lighter fabrics, I will tend to use like a white or off-white. For darker fabrics, I tend to use a gray. If I'm doing all purple, I might use purple thread. Might, but typically, depending on how light or dark it is, I will go with either the white, the beige, or the off-white, or the gray. Now, when I quilt this, I will pick a color that I think will stand out. And that could look a lot of different ways. I don't care if I'm stitching in the ditch. I don't care if I'm stitching simple lines. I am going to use something that I think works. And so I may have variegated thread that I can use that will have all the colors, the Christmas colors in it. So it may have white, at least white, red, and green in it, and I can use that for my quilting thread. If I think that, and in my case, gold goes with everything, I could use my gold thread as that on the top quilting thread. If I want to make something more custom, then I might actually quilt in every area. And let's be clear, I won't be doing it. But there are quilters who will quilt in every area, and they would use corresponding thread. So if they're in the red area, they might be using red. If they're in the green area, they might be using green. If they're in the gold area, they might use like an off-white color or gold color, depending on whatever matches. So they may match the threads up so that you see the quilting, but you don't see the thread. Okay, so this was the last one. So if this is the last one, this also needs to have the bottom on it as well. And it really doesn't matter which one has the bottom. It just matters that one piece has to have the bottom and the top on it. So this has, okay. So because I'm always honest about what I do, let's be clear. I did this, right? I did this. And then I got right down here and stitched that on the wrong side. How do you do that? Okay, because I knew I was going to have to take it out anyway. Okay, so let me use the good excuse for that. So yes, I also use the gray in the bobbin as well. If I had all white bobbins, roll wrap, I could have used white. You're not, again, depending on how you quilt it, you're not going to see the threads anyway, so it doesn't matter. And again, depending on the number of colors you have, you can get away with it. So like I said, gray is a neutral enough color that I can get away with the gray, and I would really have to stress these seams to really see that gray. And we're not going to stress the seams like that. When we quilt, we're just going to quilt on top of it, quilt around it, and it won't make a difference. So I can use different color bobbins, or I can use the same color bobbins. So I do have gray on top and on the bottom, but I could have used white on the bottom. So it's a great way to get rid of some of your bobbins. If I am quilting this, right now we're piecing. So putting all these pieces together is called piecing. So we are piecing the quilt top together. So we are not making a quilt yet. This is just the quilt top. So once I piece all of these together, when I add my batting and my backing, then I need to make some decisions, because now you're going to see the work. So I could, depending on what the backing looks like, I can have a different color in the bobbin that I do that I'm using up top. So I may decide to use gold up top. I may decide that if I'm going to have a green background, let's say it's going to be solid green, then a backing, then I may choose to use I may let me make sure I did that right. I may choose to use a green for the back, just so that it, blends in with the green. So I may choose to do gold up top, green on the back. If I really want my pattern to show through, I could decide to use gold up top and gold down the bottom. I could decide that if it's going to be green on the back, maybe I would use white or use red. So it's totally up to you to decide how you want that pattern on the other side to show through. And I don't care if it looks like a traditional quilt type design pattern or if it looks like a set of lines. It's going to form some sort of pattern on the back, and you just want to make sure that you're happy with how it shows up. Some people will use minky on the back, which is like a fleece. And if they use the minky on the back, then the thread is going to sink down into the fabric a little. And so it may or may not make a difference what color you use, because you're really not going to see it. So even if you choose, let's say, a green minky, if you use gold, to me, it might be a waste of your gold, because that is not going to show through the way that you want it to show. Okay, so we are just about done. Once I do this row together, then I just have the other rows. And again, I would rather take this to my machine, my big ironing board upstairs. So what I am going to do is sew all these rows together, and then I will take it up to my big one just to give it a really good press. So this won't get a really good press down here, but it will get a really good press for the photos upstairs. And so there are a lot of people, like even in embroidery, who buy pre-round bobbins and will absolutely get them in white or beige or gray, black, personal preference on the pre-round. But you absolutely, you could get it and then go there. I have some pre-rounds upstairs, but traditionally I just want my own. Usually, like, I'm either trolling social media, watching somebody. I may be watching a Christmas movie or some other movie. I might be running my mouth on the phone. And so usually that's when I will get a lot of my bobbins done. So I agree. I don't want to wind a bobbin and I'm sewing, which is why I pre-do my bobbins. So then that way I can focus on creating the project rather than taking care of something tedious like winding a bobbin. So I have a bobbin case that I absolutely will use. And it keeps all of my threads in there, depending on my bobbins in there, depending on the project that I'm working on. I will pull those bobbins out. And use them for the project. Oops. So just making sure again that as this goes through, that it's not pushing my seams back. So you do see me from time to time using my up and down lever, because if it's trying to push the seam in the wrong direction, I'm just lifting up the foot and pushing it back in the right direction. Okay. So again, in the real world, we would iron all this out, but you can see the brick look that's coming up. Everything should be, these strips should be on top. Keyword is should. And so if they are on top, then that means that I should just be able to connect these. And I should know that they are in the right direction. It would not be beneath me to have something that'll be upside down. And because this is mine, I would not rip it out. But I will say this, I will also do a cut in the middle of a quilt, and I will absolutely fix it from the middle. I will not rip out a whole row. That I'm not doing. There are people who will absolutely rip out a whole row. I have figured out how to not do that, and I know there are other people that don't do it as well, so it's not like my little secret. But yeah, I've looked at things or I've seen them, and it just bothers me that something is next to something that I don't want it next to. And so if that's the case, then I will pop it out of that little section and then just keep it moving. So again, all I'm doing now is just taking the rows and I'm attaching them with a clip. Traditionally, I would start both ends and then meet up in the middle, but I already knew that I might be a little off, so I'm not worried about if they don't line up exactly, because I'll just shave off that little bit on the end. It's not much, it's like 1/8 of an inch. Okay, still got 2 rows to attach, and then this is done. I'm not crossing anything that isn't pressed, except for those 2 end blocks. So I'm not worried about how I'm going to press these, and the pressing being a lot. I'm just going to press rows, and this will be fine. Now, mind you, we started a little after 3. It is a little after 4:40 now, and so with about a couple extra minutes to go, this is finished in under, well, now we didn't cut it, right? So it's not from cut to finish, but it's finished in under, a little under 2 hours. Might be exactly 2 hours, depending on how long it's going to take me to do this. But, and that's again, that's because I added an extra step. And this one didn't have as many small parts as the one that I had yesterday did. So this was a much quicker sew. And so for the Black Sewing Network Sunday service, I just really wanted to use something that I could show beginning to end. So I wanted to make sure that it was something that was easy. So I picked the easier one opposed to the one that I was working on yesterday. So you can start to see it coming together. You just have to make sure that you remember which is your top and your bottom, because remember I added the bottom one at the end. This is the bottom because it's directional. So I'm going to flip that around. And again, that's why you got to pay attention. If I did not have directional prints, it would not matter as much, but because these are directional prints, and if I wanted to do this the super cutting short way, cutting corners way, I wouldn't even do the clips. But I do prefer, again, the clips because no matter how much you try, you are pulling at your seams and you don't want them to be separated as much as possible. So I'm just getting right in there. And again, once you get the hang of it, you'll see that these clips are going on much faster than they did before. Did I do? Yeah, okay, I did do that. I didn't do it on this one, did I? Yeah, okay. Make sure I wasn't crazy there for a minute. So after I attach this piece, I got one more row to attach, and then we're done. There's no border to this. The one that I worked on yesterday had a border. So the size is about 48. I want to say it was like 48 by 72. I am making this a little bit wider. So this will end up somewhere around 40, about 56-ish. By the same 7. So I didn't make it longer. I just made it a little bit wider because I wasn't happy with the 48. So I just added an extra block on it just to make it a little bit wider. And usually, like, my throws sit on the sofa. I don't, it's a lap quilt, it's a throw. It's not meant to, to me, a twin is a better option if you're trying to stay warm and snuggle up. That's just my personal opinion, and maybe that's because I'm a little bit thicker. And because I'm a little bit thicker, I want a little bit more room. For some reason, this is shorter. I don't know why than the other pieces, but we're gonna make it work. Which one is that? That's the Christmas tree. I will make that work. So I should have. We'll make that work. Okay. And we have one last row. I am clipping a thread that came through on this side. Yeah, I feel like there was a hole in here. Like, what? Okay. So this is already up top. So this is the last one here. And I just want to make sure, because I may have to rip out that row or cut it a little bit. We'll see. I don't know how that one was off, but the other ones weren't. So I may reset that row. But if I reset it, I'm going to reset it when I get home. I am not resetting that right now because I'll be mad at myself. I'll set that down. Then I'll do it. So again, just making sure that everything lines up. Because what I could do is just add another block. And then I don't have to set it. If my two seams are starting to come apart, I'm just clipping them together in hopes that they will stay together. If not, I will just use a needling thread to kind of bring them together, because it's real wrapped. I'm not going to sit here and do every single last one. And then we will trim these down for how they go over. So again, I knew that some would go over a little bit just because of the inches that I lost on the end when I decided to do this a little differently, and that's fine for me because I'm only going to lose about a 1/4 inch to about, just about a 1/4 inch on either side to do that. Okay. And I hate using clips like this because I feel like the minute you put them all in, now you're taking them out. But again, it's going to help with those seams, and that's the most important part of it. So I haven't quite made that decision yet on how I'm going to quilt it, but I'm going to say this. I am learning how to use my long arm, and because I'm learning how to use my long arm, we don't have like a lot of fancy stitches like snowflakes and Christmas trees and all that other stuff. So traditionally what I do is meander. I do loops. I don't even like doing stars because they don't come out the way that I want them to. I am not going to do lines. I do lines when I do stitch in the ditch or like smaller quilts where I do it on my domestic machine more than I will do it on my mower. So traditionally it's like loops. I do have some, what are they called? I do have some rulers that I could use. It depends on how fast I want this to sit on my sofa. If I want them to sit on my sofa by Wednesday, we're doing loops. And we're doing meandering. If I don't care when it sits on there, do I want to change that one out? Oh, no, I'm going to cut this off. Okay. So other than the fact that this is not pressed, here is the finished quilt. And let me see if I can angle myself. It still needs to be pressed. Let me pull up my camera. I have to go change the neck a little bit. Let me change that neck without like dropping a million things. Matter of fact, let me change the location. That would make better sense. And make sure that I can see what I'm doing with that bad focus angle. So here is the final result. it needs to be pressed, I will trim up the sides where I miscalculated just a little bit. But everything is done the way that it needs to be done. So very simple, very easy. Let's just go. We'll clip this to this. With my fake design wall. And let me move that over a little bit. Let me pull that. As I take you on a C6 version so that you can see that a little bit better. And my focus is a little off, and I apologize for that. Got to get used to this new camera. Let me see if because it's focusing on something else. Whoops. Okay, let's all over the trash can. Okay, and then we'll swing this back around to this side. Okay, so we'll be working on the focus for the new camera. Bad choice for bad camera. So again, the quilt, like I said, it's really a great way to get something done quickly. So that is a quick one to do. It's something with the background I got to change out because I can see it here, but I'm clear. So I'll work on that. But again, this, I just need to figure out how I'm going to quilt it. I am going to quilt it on my long arm because it's quicker than doing it on my Husqvarna Viking. The throat size is not that great on here. So this has a smaller throat size. And when I'm trying to get that in there, I'm going to be shoving and pulling. I didn't hang that upside down. Okay. So I don't want to do that. So I am going to, take care of that part. So we will get that taken care of. And then, of course, I will take pictures. So stay tuned for the pictures. Again, thank you for joining me for the live. So I made it in under 2 hours. So in under 2 hours, we made a quilt. Again, it is, and this is like a bad version of trying to do this. So this is Lemonade. It is a free pattern from the Fat Quarter Shop. I have other videos and I do have them linked in my bios on Instagram and on TikTok. Again, it's free, so there's no commission there for me. But you could absolutely go on to Fat Quarter Shop, get the website, get the pattern and make it. And again, if I chose, I could cut that down and make something else out of it. I'm looking at it now, and it looks like I may need to switch one of those blocks around. I have two that look exactly alike sitting right on top of each other. So I may take this apart a little bit and just redo it, like switch two of the rows out, just to make it look a little bit more uniform for me, a little bit more scrappy. But other than that, I love it. So it's a quick and easy pattern. You could use a layer cake. Again, you could use scraps. Maybe I'll do it again with the straps. What do I suggest for the top stitching? What stitch length? Peppermint Mocha. I use about a 3. You could use about a 2.5 to a 3. I make too many mistakes to use a 2.5. So I prefer to use a 3 because then I feel like I can pop out those stitches a little bit better when I am piecing things together. Again, that's perfectly up to you. I reduce the stitch length if I'm doing paper piecing because you have to rip all that paper out. But for the quilting, I use about a 2.5 to a 3. For my top stitching, I tend to use like threads like Glide or King Tut or Omni. I use those brands. I like the shininess to them. So they're more durable. They're quilters, they're quilting threads. So they're not as thin like if we got Sulky back in the day from Joann's. They that have that sheen that you use when you're doing embroidery. I do like that sheen, but I will get my thread from those companies. I do spend a little bit more money on the quilting thread. Um, thank you, everyone. And like I said, it is a quick pattern. I, absolutely will press it out. And again, I will make sure that I take pictures because I met my goal today. And my goal was this weekend to get 2 quilt tops done. And I got 2 quilt tops done in a weekend. So the other one took me much longer to do than this one, but this is a lot of big pieces and then they were just subcut. So we'll press it out. We will post them here, TikTok and Instagram, so that you do see them. But again, thank you everybody for joining me for Black Sewing Network Sunday service. Like I said, in under 2 hours, as Carmen would say, we're here for a good time, not a long time. So hopefully everyone has been able to interact with each other and learn something today about quilting. Please make sure that you are subscribing and following me here on YouTube, as I am trying very hard to spend a little bit more time over here and not so much time on TikTok. But have a great one, everyone. Happy Sunday. Be safe, be warm. Make sure you shovel your cars out, and I'll see you soon. Did I find it?